This past week, I had a meeting with a friend of mine, someone who is highly connected here at the church. He is a part of our volunteer ministries. Him and his wife lead a connect group, and they're just really plugged into our church. And in the meeting, he said a statement that I've heard from other people a few times this year, and so it just really stirs my mind and heart. And what he said is, he says, though I have completely bought into the church, at times I feel out of the loop with what's going on. And he was saying this, and he goes, I'm not trying to get where I want to vote on things. I'm not trying to mingle in areas that are not under my authority. He says, I just so love the church. I want to know what's going on. And I heard his heart. And I hear whenever someone says this comment, I hear their hearts. They love the church. They just want to know what's going on. And I think for him, it was probably stirred by the fact this past Sunday, we announced that we hired a new position, the director of worship here at our church. And he brought that up. And I thought, you know what? I want to help every person in our church feel like they're in the loop. I want people to know the necessary information so that they can pray for us in the proper way, so that they can just be excited about what's going on, so they don't feel disconnected. And we've already made some changes behind the scenes for this. In our devotional book, we have a section that is called like behind the scenes. At the beginning of the Connect Group videos over the last season, I was kind of answering some questions about what goes on behind the scenes. But I want to continue to do these videos, what I'm doing right now, and release them hopefully on a weekly basis, just explaining what we do and why we do it. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw the ball back into your court. If you have a question, something you're curious about, let me just tell you, questions don't offend any of us. They don't threaten any of us. We don't feel like you're being nosy. We feel like you're part of the body of Christ and you want to know. So if you have any question, please send it in, giving us an opportunity to answer that. The only thing we would never answer is something that violated someone else's trust. But besides that, anything we're doing, any decisions that we're making, we'll give you as much information as we can that's appropriate at that time. And I think you will be excited to know about what's going on behind the scenes. So here's the question that I want to address for this first video that we're going to release now to the church. So we did these for the Connect groups, but now I'm just going to release these weekly for the church. But here's the question that I want to answer, and it's, how do you get hired at LCC? Okay, so we get this question frequently. We hire someone, they go, man, what's the process for that? So let me just tell you, there are two types of people that we hire, okay? There are people that are in-house. There are people that are part of our church already, and then at times we hire people outside of our current organization. Now, we've done this. We've hired from outside our organization that are currently on staff 3 times, all right? So the first, or the one that we just did this past Sunday, was our director of worship. The reason we hired from outside is the people inside were not qualified for what we needed. Now, we did offer it to Ben. He was qualified, but Ben did not feel called to that. I told all about that on Sunday. Ben's 100% behind this decision. He encouraged me to go out and find someone. So we hired from outside someone who had the skills necessary to handle that position, okay? So that was one. The other one was our Skip, who's over our pastoral care. Again, I needed someone who had experience in this specific area at a church that was larger than ours that could develop the system. So Skip had 40 years of pastoral experience, and that's why we hired him. Can you guess who the third person is? As you think about it, this might shock you. It's me. I was the only other person hired from outside of our church, and that was now going on 11 years ago. I had some connection to a couple that was on leadership at the time. I had already served in youth ministry for many years, and I came here to start the youth ministry. Okay, so that's one group from outside of our church. But almost entirely we hire from within the church. So how do you get hired if you attend LCC? So here's the process that we go through. As our church continues to grow, and with that growth comes different needs in our congregation, as we start to talk about this behind the scenes as pastors, we look at the position of what we're starting to see needed, and usually it's unfortunate because of a weakness. And so all of a sudden we start to realize in this one area we're dropping the ball and we're not doing effective. So there's a need there, or a position that was maybe at one time volunteer becomes just so much to it that it becomes a full-time position or maybe a part-time position. So as we discuss that, what we start to do is have conversations, and we go around and I say, all right, tell me this is my terminology, tell me your mega volunteer. Tell me the person who is just hitting home runs in your area as a volunteer. And that's a terminology I've used for many years, mega volunteer. But this is the person who puts the church as a high priority. So it's the person that makes personal sacrifices in their lives in order to be able to volunteer here. They're a person who take a lot of responsibility on themselves and effectively deal with it. They're leaders, so they actually work with other volunteers. And so we just kind of note these people. And so as everyone starts to say names, like they'll say, in my ministry, here are my 1, 2, 3 really just mega volunteers, the ones that are just hitting home runs week after week. And they go through. This becomes like a running list for us. And so as they say them, we look at that person and we talk about them and their personality. And oftentimes we all know them at that point. Sometimes we don't, but we discuss about them and we look at the position that we have and we look at the mega volunteers in every area. And we start to think, could that person fit this role? And sometimes it's cross ministry. So sometimes we have a need in this ministry, but this person has a mega volunteer in another ministry, but we realize they have the character, they have the personality for it, they have the talents for it, and they might work good. And so once we have these conversations, and they last sometimes for weeks, as we're just evaluating people, looking at people, once we determine that this person would probably be a good fit, almost entirely we go and we recruit that person for that position. So we don't open positions up just in a general, everyone submit their resumes, and I'll tell why we don't do that later, but we go and personally recruit our mega volunteers for that role because we have found this is the most effective way, because at that point, we've already discovered their character. We've already discovered their heart. We've discovered their talents, and we know they have bought into our vision, and that is why we have been so effective in keeping a healthy staff culture and really growing our church in a healthy way. So then what do we do with all those other mega volunteers? We just keep noting in our head who they are. And we try to get to know them better. We include them in other meetings. We include them in discussions. We get their opinions. And at times we just hang out with them. There are people that don't even realize this is going on. I'll just call them, hey, do you want to grab lunch? Hey, do you want to go out to see a movie? Hey, do you want to do something fun? Because I just want to get to know their personality, because in my mind I think you might someday be on staff with us. So why don't we then just release it to the church for resumes that come in? We have found that to be an ineffective way for a couple of reasons. One is when people submit their resumes, this is just a reality of the situation. They feel qualified for the position, but if we don't feel like they meet the qualifications that we need, it offends them. So it's a thing that we have learned offends people. Maybe they don't get an interview, or maybe they get an interview, but they don't get the position, and that offends them because they don't feel like then they are valued enough. But the truth is they are valued. We just don't feel like in this position it's right for them. And so our system of recruiting people has been very effective and one that I think we'll continue to do in the future. Now, at times we do open. At times we say, hey, we just want to get people's resumes, and we will even use that as an opportunity to get some resumes on file for future jobs that we might have. And so when we have another job, we think, okay, who are our mega volunteers and who are some of those resumes that were submitted before? Do any of them fit this position? So that's how we typically hire. And I'll tell you, it's an exciting process when we offer them a job and they excitedly join our team, and we love going through that. So I wish I could hire everyone, but that's just not a reality. So what do you do if you have a question? Well, you can email info@yourlcc.org. And I want to answer any questions you might have about what's going on behind the scenes. Send them in, and we'll just put them in a queue, and we'll answer them the most effective way we can. Some weeks, if they're short questions, we might answer 2 to 3 questions. But please don't hesitate. Send them in. We want to answer the questions. We want you to feel completely connected, and we're excited about this. Guys, I'm so proud of you. I love you, and the future is bright at LCC.